I never saw it coming. One minute I was polishing my presentation for the quarterly board meeting, rehearsing the revenue slides, tightening up my talking points, running through my FAQs, and the next I was the punchline of my boss's offhand quip in front of our entire executive board. My boss, Daniel Harrington, leaned back in his high-back leather chair, arms spread wide as though to embrace his own authority, and looked at me with that cool, amused smile that always made my skin crawl. "Thank you, Maya," he said, voice smooth as iced bourbon. "Always great to see your enthusiasm. Reminds me of an eager intern who still hasn't learned to calibrate her expectations." The boardroom fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the air conditioner. My cheeks burned. My heart pounded so hard I could almost hear it. I forced a smile I hoped, looked even-keeled, and nodded, clutching my slim metal clicker like a lifeline. Just 2 weeks ago, I'd discovered the emails, the ones Daniel had thought he buried, the ones he'd sent himself under a burner address, praising himself for taking sole credit on the product roadmap that I'd conceived and developed. He'd even forwarded a draft of my proposal to the marketing team, attached to a note in his own name. At first, I'd stared at the screen in disbelief. September 3rd, at 2:17 a.m., subject line, roadmap finalized, kudos to me, and almost laughed, because the naive part of me still believed he'd do the right thing. But then I realized those emails were my whole case, the proof that without me, Harrington Inch.'s flagship product would still be a scribble on a whiteboard. I didn't forward them. Not yet. I tucked them away under layers of bookmarks and a password-protected folder labeled anything but Harrington. I needed more time to build my case, to find a champion on the board, to repair my reputation among colleagues, to protect myself if Daniel tried to fire me. That was 3 weeks ago. 2 days ago, the chief of HR cornered me in the staircase landing by the 7th floor. "Maya," she'd said, voice low, "the board is asking questions about tonight's presentation. They want to see more than just numbers. They want to know you're aligned with the company vision." Concern flickered in her eyes. "Daniel's been territorial. Be careful." I forced a nod, my knees wobbling. "Thanks for the heads up." Now here I was, standing in front of a semicircle of cold, trim suits, our CFO cross-legged with a single eyebrow raised, our COO scribbling furiously, the board chairman reclining like a shark. It was my turn. I clicked to slide 26, a break-even forecast for our next quarter. The margins stretched razor, thin if we didn't expand into the Asian market. "Let's call it," I said, voice steady. "With the new supply chain optimizations, we project a 12-month ROI of 18%, even accounting for the new tariffs." Behind me on the screen was a graph showing a gradual upward curve. "Hold that," said Daniel, leaning forward. He steepled his fingers, smirk curling his lips. "Maya, darling, it's adorable how you've bundled those cost-saving measures from the Shanghai contracts into your model. But tell us, since none of us on the board wrote that email praising your bold new procurement initiative, who exactly came up with that idea?" I felt all the air drain from my lungs. I opened my mouth, closed it. My mind raced, "Don't flinch, don't apologize, but explain." I took a breath. "That's a team effort," I began. "Oh, come on," Daniel interrupted, voice rising. "You're the junior VP of product. You're the one who told us only your division could pull it off." He chuckled. "You pitched that to me at 11 at night, over a Slack message, no less, like a kid showing off a new toy. It'd be great to hear whose brilliance that was." A murmur rolled through the audience, heads nodding, phones tapping. I glanced at HR's head. She gave me a tiny shake. My chest tightened. The board chairman cleared his throat. "Why don't you walk us through it, Maya?" I put my fingers on the desk, gathering what composure I could. The idea originated from a cost analysis spreadsheet I shared with Daniel on Slack. I said, each word a beat of war drums. The spreadsheet detailed potential savings if we shifted vendor angles. I followed up with a prototype contract structure. I saw a few eyebrows lift. "The screenshots are saved. I can share them after this meeting." Daniel's mouth twitched. "Snapshots don't make a strategy, Maya." He straightened, eyes glittering. "Maybe you should stick to your scope and let the senior team handle the big picture." The barb landed. My jaw clenched. I clicked again, slide 27. A screenshot of our Slack channel from August 12th, timestamp 11:07 p.m., titled Strategy Discussion Cost Initiative, showing Daniel replying, Brilliant, Maya. Let's present to the board. I'll polish up the deck. A hush fell. There it was, Daniel's own admission. Ah, I said softly. I felt all eyes shift, curiosity, shock, scandalizing. Daniel blanched. I suppose you recall this message. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I watched the board's expressions change. The CFO leaned sideways, whispering to the COO. The chairman's pen tapped his chin. My heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from the rush of vindication. Daniel swallowed, then let out a brittle laugh. Fine. Yes, she had the idea. But the execution, that. He stopped, eyes flicking to the screenshot behind me. He cleared his throat. As I said, we refined it as a team. I held my gaze on him. That's fair. And of course, the final deck incorporates my design, my numbers, my projections. I turned to the board. I'd be happy to provide the full email thread for review. I expect these initiatives to reduce costs by 14% in the first half. The chairman tapped his gavel lightly. Let's move on to the next item. He looked at Daniel. Thank you for the clarification. As the meeting moved on to the marketing funnel redesign, I felt my cheeks flush, not from humiliation, but from triumph. I'd stood my ground. I'd forced Daniel to admit what was true. I packed up my clicker, closed my laptop, and left the boardroom with a steady gait. Outside, HR's head caught me by the elbow. Maya, are you okay? I nodded, heart still racing. Yes, thank you. She exhaled in relief. We'll follow up with the board. Make sure your credit is documented. I smiled, a real one. I think they saw it themselves. She glanced back toward the boardroom doors. You have the emails? I tapped my tablet screen. Every one of them, filed under my little insurance policy. Her eyes widened, and she grinned. Well done. That evening, I found Daniel in the executive lounge, nursing a scotch. He looked up as I approached, face unreadable. Maya, he said, voice tight. Got a sec? I perched on the edge of a leather sofa across from him. Sure. He poured himself another drink. Listen, I wanted to apologize. My remark was unprofessional. I didn't mean to undermine you. I studied his face. For weeks, I'd rehearsed my response. But now I just wanted honesty. Why did you do it? I asked, voice gentle but firm. Mock me in front of the board. He sighed. Pressure to deliver. I knew your initiative was strong, but I needed to look like the visionary. I panicked. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I nodded. Thank you. He set down his glass. I'll make sure the board acknowledges your work. And if you ever need support. He stopped, uncertain. Then I'll be there. I tilted my head. I appreciate the gesture. He exhaled. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'd like you to keep leading these cost initiatives. You're good at it. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Gladly, I said. Not because of his praise, but because I'd earned it. 2 days later, I received an email from the board chairman himself. Maya, thank you for your presentation. We've asked the board secretary to send you a revised minutes package, crediting you with the cost optimization strategy. They also want to explore next steps on market expansion. I leaned back at my desk, a smile creeping across my face. I had the emails. I'd stood up for myself. I'd proven that a buried truth, once unearthed, can topple even the most calculated facade. The sun dipped low over the city skyline. As I closed my laptop, the hum of the office fading around me. I gathered my things, ready to head home, heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Tomorrow, I'd circle back to Daniel's burner address and archive those messages for safekeeping. But tonight, I'd savor the evening air and the quiet victory. I'd stood my ground. I'd shown the board and myself what it meant not to be underestimated. And as I stepped out into the cool night, the skyscrapers glittering like stars fallen to earth, I realized I'd not only defended my ideas, I'd reclaimed my voice, and that, more than any spreadsheet or email thread, was the greatest credit of all. I never expected my Monday morning to start with humiliation. But there I was, standing in the cavernous glass and steel boardroom, watching my boss, Alan Matthews, the CEO who'd hired me straight out of grad school, lean back in his high-backed leather chair and grin as though he'd just landed the punchline of a joke, whose setup I'd missed. The first rays of sunlight cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the polished table, silver nameplates, and the two expensive suits of our entire executive board. Thank you, Marisol. Alan said, voice smooth and amused, for that enthusiastic dive into our Q2 projections. It's adorable how you still haven't grasped the art of managing expectations at this level. His eyebrows arched in mock encouragement. A ripple of polite laughter followed, the sort that travels like a wave between well-heeled colleagues who mustn't rock the boat. My stomach clenched. I forced a smile, sharp, brittle, as though I'd been waiting for this moment, thrilled by his humor. My presentation clicker felt like a burning coal in my palm, and my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I managed, glad it resonated, and pressed the button to move on to the next slide. My voice was steadier than I felt. Behind me, the colorful bar graph bloomed into a waterfall chart showing our planned versus actual customer acquisition costs. Mark Henderson, our CFO, nodded approvingly. Jennifer Wu, VP of Operations, scribbled notes. I reminded myself, this data was solid, based on the algorithm I'd built and the client intelligence I'd stitched together across 3 continents. But Alan's smile lingered, sly, predatory. Of course, our junior VP always goes full throttle. Tell us again, Marisol, who devised this fascinating acquisition model. I took a steadying breath. The model originated from the cross-functional team I lead, the analytics, marketing, and product squads. I synthesized their insights into this framework. I swept my hand over the chart, the nocturnal benchmarking sessions, the beta test results. They all feed into that 8% ROI. I met his gaze. It's entirely transparent. He chuckled. Transparent, she says. More like naive. After all, you learned the ropes in our shredded TJ Hooker office, a far cry from the acumen required at the helm. He winked at the board. I've always admired enthusiasm in entry-level hires, but maturity now, that's priceless. A collective inhale, a polite titter. I steadied my hands. Experience is built over time, I said. But innovation, sometimes that comes from fresh perspectives. I clicked to slide 23, a line chart projecting revenue growth. If we expanded into the Southeast Asia market, my idea, vetted by my research team, and 2 months of pilot campaigns. Cute, Alan said, voice dripping. Let's hear from someone who's actually negotiated with Japanese suppliers, or better yet, someone who's closed a deal in Singapore. Anyone? He passed the question like a hot potato around the polished table. Silence. He smirked. Exactly. I felt my cheeks heat. The board glanced at each other. Then Mark Henderson set down his pen. Actually, Alan, we did negotiate with Southeast Asia vendors. I have a contract signed last week. He passed a single sheet to the chairman, signed by Marisol as primary liaison. The chairman's eyebrows climbed his forehead. Marisol, you spearheaded this. I nodded. My pulse thundered. I coordinated the RFP responses, negotiated price breaks, and ensured compliance with local regulations. I squared my shoulders. My emails to the Singapore office are time-stamped in the system. A faint smile cracked on the chairman's face. Alan frowned, reddening. Well, the minutes will reflect who presented the board deck, not the intern who anchored the footnotes. I nearly laughed. Of course. But the footnotes influenced the entire narrative. I clicked to a hidden slide. Email audit trail. The screen filled with email excerpts. My messages to Alan, his enthusiastic great work, replies, and my follow-ups with the Singapore team. The boardroom froze. The CFO's jaw unhinged. The chairman leaned forward, squinting. Is this? He began. I pressed play on the next slide. A screenshot from Alan's personal Gmail, accessed via our corporate Gmail log, where he'd forwarded my email thread to a rival department under his own name. I cleared my throat. I believe this explains why my contributions were omitted from the credits. I let the silence fill the room like a spotlight. Alan's face went ashen. For a moment he looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Then he forced a laugh, thin as tissue paper. All right, enough theatrics, let's move on. But the board chairman rapped the table with his pen. Let's not. I'd like to hear from our expert, who engineered this model, and not just from her slide deck. He fixed me with a considerate look. Marisol, please. I took a breath. I walked to the front, step by measured step. Thank you, Mr. Bradley. I looked at Alan and held his gaze. I drafted the acquisition algorithm. I negotiated the vendor contracts. I even coded the first prototype of our supply chain dashboard. All of this is documented in our email system. A faint whisper of excitement hummed through the board, curiosity shifting alliances. Mark Henderson nodded. She delivered 3/4 of our cost savings last quarter alone. Alan opened his mouth, then snapped it shut. After a glance at the chairman, he cleared his throat and said, Marisol's work is solid. I apologize for the mix-up. His eyes flicked to me, carefully avoiding guilt. Team, please note her contributions in the minutes. I inclined my head, voice cool. Thank you. And if anyone needs the full email archive, I'll be happy to share it. The chairman's nod was firm. He turned his attention back to the CFO. Now, Mark, where were we? After the meeting adjourned, I sat at my desk with trembling fingers, replaying every moment. My colleagues, some quietly congratulated me. Some glanced with newfound respect, others with wary astonishment. I opened the email folder labeled Harbored Evidence. There lay 50 threads, dating back 6 months. My first prototype memo, Daniels' brilliant work, replies. My polite reminders to include me as lead. I highlighted them all, exported them to a single PDF, and saved it to my encrypted drive. My phone buzzed, a text from Mark Henderson. Nice work today. Board wants you on the new Asia Steering Committee. Drinks later? I smiled. Thanks. See you at happy hour. Before closing my laptop, I drafted one more email, this time to HR and compliance. Subject: Attribution of work body. Following today's board meeting, I would appreciate an official acknowledgement of my contributions in the Q2 presentation and related vendor negotiations. I'm also forwarding the email threads demonstrating my authorship and coordination for record. Thank you for your support. I hit send, leaned back, and felt the tension drain away. The corporate arena could be brutal social warfare, titles and power plays, but today evidence had been my shield and sword. I'd turned the tables on the man who tried to erase me. That evening, at the rooftop bar downtown, I met Mark and a few colleagues. The city lights shimmered below, cocktails clinked, and laughter bubbled around us. Mark toasted, to Marisol, who reminds us that integrity and hard work still matter. Glasses rose. I took a sip of my ginger mule, warmth and pride blooming in my chest. Alan strolled by, approached our table. He cleared his throat. Marisol, might I have a word? His tone lacked its usual hauteur. I nodded, excusing myself from the group. Outside, the night air was crisp. He stood uncomfortably, suitcase wedged between his legs. I'm sorry, he said, voice low. I overstepped today. I let my ego get the better of me. He stared at the pavement. I've submitted a letter to the board, acknowledging your work. I hope we can move forward. I studied him, betrayal, regret, professionalism, woven together. I took a breath. Thank you, Alan. I accept your apology. But from now on, credit goes where credit is due. My voice was calm. I look forward to leading the Asia initiative. He nodded, relief flickering. Good. And, if you ever need anything, advice, resources, let me know. His words felt genuine, if awkward. I put a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that surprised us both. I will. Thanks. Back at home, I tucked my phone on the nightstand, mind still racing with today's events. I thought of my inbox, notes of thanks, invitations to join strategy sessions, a tentative lunch invite from our CEO. Tomorrow, I draft the Asia expansion roadmap, integrate the supplier data, propose a local hire in Singapore. My emails, would guide every step. I closed my laptop and looked at the glow of the city beyond the bedroom window. Proof had a power all its own. It was the quiet equity that turned laughter into respect, mockery into mea culpa. My boss had mocked me. He'd forgotten that, in the digital age, all words leave a trace. And today, every trace had spoken truth. Turning off the bedside lamp, I whispered into the dark, rest easy, Maya Marshall. You've earned your seat at the table. And as I drifted to sleep, the hum of the midnight city below sounded less like a battlefield and more like a stage, one where I just claimed my role, and where tomorrow's scene would be mine to write.